did you feel about Lilburn? About what happened when he retired? Was that upsetting for you? Or?
It was perplexing that he stopped working, although I didn't have any right to have an opinion about that, really. I mean, that was his affair. I think his role for me initially was hugely important, and then latterly, there was a connection, but nowhere near as intense. I think the interesting thing about those things is when you reach a certain point in your own career and you look back on the previous generation, you can feel yourself reassessing them. And I think it's really important to do that and to have a clear, realistic, especially if someone asks you that question, to answer it honestly, not in a vindictive way, but also not, I keep on referring to dear old Jack all the time. I remember him saying to me once, if you tell somebody something often enough, they'll believe it. And either that's the way reputations are built, isn't it? And in the end, you feel you can't say anything else because that's the received wisdom about this person, And the one thing you can be sure of is whatever the received wisdom is, it's probably got fuck all to do with the reality for that person. Because it's made from observations from outside, motives that have been gleaned from the way that person behaved. But what actually drove that behaviour is a secret. It belongs to the person, and that's the whole live history. And it'll happen to me, it happens to everyone. Especially when you're dead. People just glean the data. They take the received wisdom, they make a package of it, And so I think Douglas was a gay man living in a time when it was illegal. It was a criminal act. He was filled with guilt and anger and frustration in all sorts of ways. He was enormously difficult in lots of ways, but he was also hugely committed to his subject, and that was a prime concern for him in all sorts of spheres. And just have a look at what he achieved, the White Outer Press, all sorts of stuff, and you can't take that away. That's just sitting there. But in the end, of course, everybody's got their personal demons, and he had plenty, and they affected his connections with other, especially younger men, especially if they weren't gay. There were all sorts of tensions and difficulties there that had to be negotiated. But I think that was a tragic generation in lots of ways. That's why I always think of my generation as being so blessed, because there was the 50s, 60s and 70s. There was women's liberation. There was the protest movement. There was all sorts of stuff that you could just get out and do, just bust it open. And the same with the art world, especially in New Zealand. All kinds of activities going on in the 80s especially. When I look back on it now, it was just extraordinary time. That people like Douglas's generation didn't have. They were just caught in this awful vice. So it was complicated. But I think for me, his role was just as a person who took art seriously. It was really serious. I mean, just living in his house, it was like being in a chapel, I mean, covered in New Zealand artwork, everything about it was just, and the idea that he would let me live there had an innate support. It was saying, oh, well, he must think that I'm okay. I never said it, of course. So, yeah, no, when he retired, I think I just sort of felt, yes, he's got his own reasons for that.